U.S. Route 40 at night feels like a river the state forgot to name. It has its own tide, truck lights sliding in slow, forgiving waves, neon billboards blinking in a rhythm that doesn't belong to the hour, the hiss of tires passing in the wet, not rain, but the kind of damp that climbs up from the canal and licks the shoulders of the road. Gas stations turn into islands, the motels, the diners, the low, flat boxes of strip mall storefronts. Everything hums, even after midnight. If you pull over and open your window, the turnpike breathes at you like an animal that has decided not to bite. I had done the late shift at the salon, swept hair, soaked combs, counted tips twice, like counting could turn them into more. The owner's husband said he would swing me by my place in Brookmont after close, but he drank a beer with a friend who came in just to say hey, and each hey turned into another beer. So I said I'd catch a ride and pretended I had options. My phone blinked to 3% and then to none, dead like a fish you keep flushing that won't learn to leave. I walked along the edge of the shoulder, past the light where the old buffet used to be, past the mattress store that always looks like it must be laundering something other than mattresses, and I practiced the careful way of being a woman near a road after midnight. Shoulders forward, keys between fingers. Make yourself small and noticeable at the same time. He eased in beside me like he was remembering how. Not fast, not showy. The van was work white, chalk dull under the sodium lamps, the kind of white that comes from washings and not from paint. A cheap magnetic sign sat slightly crooked on the door, some yard service with a phone number too clean to be true. The sliding door ridge was a dirt line. The wheel rims had a polite amount of rust. The driver wore an ordinary cap, the brim cracked where men's thumbs worry things. His hands were on the wheel like he was teaching a child to see that 10 and 2 are not just numbers. "Miss," he said through the rolled-down passenger window. His voice wasn't a bark. It wasn't a question either. It was warm the way glove compartments get warm. "You headed east or west?" "Home," I said, which is not an answer on a map but is an answer where we were. He nodded. "Hop in. The cold gets mean along this stretch after 12. I hesitated. "It's what you do. You let caution put its hand on your shoulder and push down until your bones make the right shape. You look in the window reflection to see if your face looks like the kind of face that should be sitting in strange vans. You say some sentences to yourself like prayers. Not me, not tonight, not this." The wind cut through my sweater anyway. The diner at the corner blinked its open sign at me and didn't move. The bus would not appear. Somewhere a truck downshifted with a cough like a man remembering he is older than he pretends. I opened the door. A rosary hung from the rear view. The plastic kind, church supper white, missing 2 beads. It tapped the glass twice in the heater's breath and then stopped like it didn't want to be rude. The van smelled like work, rubber mats and coffee and something sweet metallic. Not blood, not bleach, just a clean you'd get if you overloved your tools. An old blanket, gray as dishwater, lay neatly folded in the back. A blue cooler with a cracked handle nudged the milk crate that sat between us. Inside the crate, I clocked the things men put there when they want to be useful. A flashlight with the rubber ring cracked at the base, a roll of duct tape, a coil of nylon that could be anything. He saw my eyes take inventory and did not flinch. That was wrong, thing number 1. Men who mean well like you to see their kindness, men who mean otherwise like you to see nothing at all. His ease with my seeing was a decision. "Cold tonight," he repeated, like weather was a safe friend we had in common. "Seatbelt?" I clicked it. It sounded like consenting to something I had not yet named and meant to keep unnamed. He pulled out without craning his neck to make sure anyone was there to be annoyed by him. His hands did their quiet corrections on the wheel. He kept us 5 under the limit like he had measured the road and found the exact speed at which cops don't look twice. He didn't turn on the radio. He filled the silence with the kind of small talk that doesn't try to be a bridge. It just wants you to use your feet. "We're on 40, he said. "Which cut?" "Bear," I lied. "Past the mall." He nodded as if the word mall were a place in the mouth and not in the county. "You'll be careful," he said. "People go missing off these shoulders when they think shoulders are places to stand." "People get home too," I said, and made myself laugh a piece of a laugh just to see what it did to his shoulders. "Some," he agreed, and the word some in his voice made a little cliff in the road I had to drive around. He had the habit of checking the mirrors in a rhythm that belonged to a song I did not know. Tap, tap, tap. The heater breathed on my knees and lifted the scent of the van up into my face so that every inhale became a small lesson in what I had accepted. The rosary made another soft clack, and then another. He was not ugly. He was not handsome. The cap helped him be exactly the man you forget when you get home and think, someone was nice today, and I will never be able to prove it. We passed the plasma center. The flicker in the corner window told me the janitor was still telling the floor what to do. The laundromat had one light left on near the soda machine, a blue wash across the plastic that makes soda taste like hospital. He didn't speed up for yellow lights. He didn't slow down for people standing where they shouldn't be. He picked up his coffee, took a sip, set it back in the holder, and the van barely noticed. He said, lightly, "You got someone waiting up?" "My roommate works nights," I said, which was nearly true. "She texts if the door doesn't creak by 1. He said, which could be anything. A kindness, a calculation, a man deciding whether 1 is a real number. We talked like people in line at the grocery talk. Weather, potholes, how the county keeps forgetting the left turn at Route 7 needs repainting. He told me he trimmed trees when there were trees to trim, and did whatever's honest and open mouth the rest of the year. He liked to describe things in little riddles and then explain, like a magician revealing the trick after you clap to make sure he thinks you are nice. He never asked my name. That was wrong thing number 2. Good men name you because it helps them prove to themselves they meant well. Bad men keep you a noun. I watched the exits the way you watch a sick child's breathing. Count, wait, count again, wait for the hitch. We should have stayed straight for 2 more lights and then turned left at the donut shop with the hand-lettered cash only sign. He made a right earlier than the map in my head wanted to allow. The new road had the particular silence that happens behind strip malls where the pallets make tidy little cities for stray cats. He didn't announce the turn. He didn't apologize for it. He put us where the road had decided no one interesting lived. Shortcut, he said. Not a lie. Not the truth you want. I put one glove on in the passenger seat because my fingers were beginning to find reasons to fidget that would not obey me. He watched that with the corner of his eye and smiled a little like a man might smile at a rabbit who keeps pretending not to be there. Then he reached across the crate as if to put the lid on the cooler. His sleeve brushed my knee like manners. His hand didn't touch the duct tape. Not yet. It rested, palm down, 2 inches from it. He wasn't showing me what he could grab. He was showing me what he didn't have to grab to feel safe. "Hey," I said, soft as paper. "I can walk from here." He kept us moving. "Don't like walking at night," he said. "It makes the dark think it owns you." "I've got that look about me," I said. "The owned kind?" He considered that like he was being flattered and didn't want to look greedy about it. "You've got the look of someone who wants to get home," he said. "All the best people do." He tapped the hazard button once. The soft click-click of blinkers began under the hum of the engine. One red wink bloomed on the wall of the mattress store, then died. Then another and another. He turned them off. He looked at me the way a man looks at a child before he says no for the first time and wonders whether the child will cry or become interesting. "We'll keep the heater on for a minute," he said. "Then I'll let you out. Sound all right?" The way you can tell no is coming is that a man will offer you something he can afford to lose. He looked at my hands again. He looked at the crate again. He didn't touch the duct tape. He touched instead the rosary. He pressed it once where it met the mirror, and his thumb made a little click against plastic that sounded silly and human and almost made me forgive everything. The way a laugh can make you take your shirt off for a swimming hole that is in fact a ditch. "Ever say one?" he asked. "A rosary?" "Not since my grandmother," I said. "She used to let me count the beads and only shushed me for saying the Hail Mary too hungry." "Hunger's a good prayer," he said, and smiled. It made him look briefly like the kind of man who takes the cart back to the store when the wind pushes it towards someone else's bumper. He pulled into the narrow lane between the back of the payday loan store and the barber shop that keeps failing to decide if it wants to be open. The ground glittered where rock salt pretended it didn't want to be invisible. He nudged the nose of the van into the mouth of shadow and cut the engine. The sudden quiet had weight. The heater's last sigh tried to lift it and couldn't. He looked at his hands. His fingers flexed, that small warm-up athletes do when practice is more ritual than need. "Okay," he said, and language turned into furniture we had to crawl over to get out of the room. He didn't turn to me like a man turns to a person. He turned to me like a man turns to a task. He kept his voice steady, so gentle it made my teeth ache. "This part goes better if we're good," he said. "I don't like mess." "I'm all mess," I said. It was nearly bravado. It felt like pebbles in my mouth. "I'm a salon towel after prom." He chuckled at that, genuine, a note he hadn't put on the sheet for himself. He reached toward the crate without looking down and settled his fingers on the duct tape like a pianist letting the keys know he is there. He didn't lift it. He waited for me to see it. Then he took his hand away. He unlatched his seatbelt. He didn't get out. He seemed, instead, to take the van around us and fold it into a smaller shape. This was a den. That was a door. I wasn't in a passenger seat. I was in the room he had brought with him. "Why me?" I asked, because even though there are 100 wrong whys, because your phone died, because your boss was inconsiderate, because you were cold, because you got in, a man will sometimes confess to his favorite out loud and believe that makes him complicated. "Because you said yes," he said, not unkind, like he was handing me a cup of water. "You asked the wrong question," I said. He smiled so gently I wanted to break a window to make the air honest again. "All questions are the wrong question," he said, and that sentence was wrong thing number 3, because men who like to play at riddles sometimes think they are the only ones who understand the answers. He reached, finally, for the sliding door latch. He glanced to the mirrors, both in that rhythm that belongs to habits so old they were once lullabies. He cracked the door 3 inches. Cold licked the edge of the gray blanket. The rosary tapped a happy little clack. He breathed in a lungful of the alley and tasted it for electricity. Then, in the tone of a man inviting you to stand for a hymn, he said, "Back!" and let the syllable sit where a command would have been if he were the type to be unfriendly about it. "I don't want to," I said. It was honesty. Finally, bald and small and perfectly mine. He nodded as if I had recited a line exactly as he had written it. "I know," he said. "This part isn't for you." He moved the milk crate with one finger so it slid toward the driver's side, and the blue cooler slid 2 inches. And in that movement, I noticed the rug. The van's floor was covered in a shag of blue I haven't seen since pictures of basements and rec rooms from the year I was born. It curled at the edges like an animal asleep with one eye open, threads feathered loose where shoes had fussed at them. He didn't expect me to notice the carpet. He expected me to notice the tape. He gathered the blanket and nodded to the gap, and I did the thing that saved me and almost put me in the ground. I obeyed once, slowly, in a way that made him believe obedience was now part of my body. It gave me 10 seconds. 10 seconds can be a career. I put my hands on the van's sliding lip. The metal had the cold of garden shears left outside. I brought one knee up, then the other. I ducked my head. I tucked my coat under me like I was a thing that belongs in boxes. He didn't reach for me. He loved that I was willing to step into the shape of his plan without him touching me. He loved it so much he let a hand of his attention go to the driveway mouth, a last mirror glance. And that's where I put the first little nick in the picture. I palmed the bus card out of my pocket. I'd kept it all week in case winter broke the buses and made me prove I was allowed to ride one anyway. The corner of it, laminated, thin, mean, felt like the same corner every card has, which is to say useless until the world suddenly introduces you to a kind of tape that loves failing if you make it round a corner it didn't plan to meet. He let me arrange my ankles on the blanket like he was doing a kindness. He took the coil of nylon and let it loop into his palm like a trick a boy learns with shoelaces. He spoke to me like we were coworkers who had both been asked to work late and would tell each other the parts we liked least when the job was over. "Ankles," he said. Not a command, an invitation to collaborate in my own quieting. "Will you hurt me?" I asked. Not because I needed to know, I knew, but because a man who thinks of himself as kind sometimes wants to put a promise in the room he can point to later and say he kept, even when he didn't. "I won't be cruel," he said. The word cruel folded itself into a soft thing when he said it. He believed that. He believed he had a system that turned cruelty into a thrift. No waste, no loud. He believed a tidy act was better than a messy one because mess is an insult to the person who has to clean it. He wrapped the nylon once, the blanket gave. The wrinkle under my calf was a memory I would keep for a year. I would feel it in my sleep like a ghost elbow. He didn't cinch tight. He was showing me he could, and then he would. He liked saving the worst for the moment he felt he had earned it. He reached for the tape with his left hand. I lifted my head to look like I was making room for him and moved the bus card big, too big, and then small, so small it was just a glitter moving under the blanket against the first uncommitted edge of adhesive. I have never been religious. That was my rosary. He put his palm, warm through glove, on my shoulder. He said my favorite sentence in his voice so gently that I have to remember that the sentence is my favorite, not the voice. Breathe. I did. I breathed like a woman pretending she could learn to like swimming in a dark lake because everyone else is already in and laughing. The tape made a little whisper as the man who was not cruel let it introduce itself to my wrists. Out front on Route 40, a semi went by. The van made a little internal shrug at the wind of it. The rosary tapped. The nylon made a friendly sound against nylon. Nothing here believed in me except the corner of that card and the part of me that had learned, at 10, how to obey until there was a better choice. "Good," he said, "and you would be shocked at how beautiful the word good is when you hate it." He leaned past me to look down the alley toward where a security truck sometimes crawls like a bored beetle. He did not see one. He smiled, not at me, at the schedule that was happening on time. I saw his inner wrist, a pale, pale little crescent scar that had healed so long ago it had learned to be part of a man's hand. He thought you couldn't see his insides because he was so proud of his outsides. Men like that are always wrong about what eyes can do. "Tell me," I said. "Tell me the steps." I needed the comfort of a list. I needed a rail to hold. He obliged. They always oblige when the thing inside them loves that you understand you will become a number. "This, then a quick ride, then quiet, then done," he said. "No extra." "Extra," I repeated and nodded like a clerk. He smoothed the tape with his thumb in a way that made me understand with my back teeth what the word tender can be used for when it is not being a compliment. I put the corner of the card against the seam the tape had not properly married to itself and found the imperfection I could live through. 10 seconds will give you right up to terror. 10 more will introduce you to hope. He gave me both. He took a breath that belonged on a tutorial video. He tipped his cap back. He reached for my face with the tape and paused like a man showing you he will not touch you if you cry at the right time. He wasn't being kind. He was being patient with his own need to be seen as kind. I flinched anyway. I made a little show of it because men like to be heroes about the flinch. He let me be delicate. He let the tape think about my cheek instead of meeting it, and that is how the card got under the first wrap of the first loop around my wrist. He said, almost murmured, "You're doing fine." And I, who have never loved lying as much as I demanded I love it then, said, "You too." He laughed. It was the realest sound he made all night. He loved being told he was good. He loved being told he was not a monster. He loved being told he was the kind of man who can do hard things kindly. He loved it so much he reached to adjust the heater like a gentleman, and I pressed the hazard button with the outer edge of my knuckle, and the van began to tell the night in red that something was not normal here. He turned it off. He did it without reprimand. He did it like a man setting a spoon back in a drawer because someone handled it with the wrong hand. But it made him lift his face toward the dashboard for half a second, and in that half second, count it with me. 1, 2, 3. The card found the place where adhesive turns on its maker, and my skin stopped agreeing to the tape. He did not hear the peal. You would not either. You only hear it when your heart recognizes the sound as something it can use to live. "Back," he said again, as if there were anywhere else to go. And I thought of the river of Route 40, the tide, the hiss, the gas stations like buoys, and I obeyed again once more, and bought myself my next 10 seconds with the currency of someone else's devotion to tidy. The thing about the back of a van is that it wants to be a room where decisions get made by objects. The rubber mat tells you where your knees go. The folded blanket suggests what the temperature means. The little ratchet strap in the corner hums at the exact pitch that says this is a tool for keeping things still, even when the road would like to teach them otherwise. You can make yourself feel small inside a room like that, and small can be a cloak if you know how to keep your eyes big. He knew how to keep his voice small. "Lie down," he said. "We don't have to make it worse." I didn't ask for whom. It would have broken the spell he was casting on himself about an act being a kind of mercy if done quickly. I lay down. I turned my face toward the wall steel and let my breath paint it fog up close. I arranged my bound hands under my coat so the card could keep its slow insect work in the dark. The tape had not given up the fight. It gummed at the corner with the sullen lick-lip sound defeated adhesives make when they want to believe in themselves again. The nylon at my ankles was comfortingly wrong. He hadn't cinched it to the point of dumb pain. He wanted obedience, not power yet. Men like him love being obeyed more than they love winning. Winning has an end. Obedience is forever. He slid the door until the crack of cold was exactly wide enough to keep the fog from making a cloud inside. He turned back to the front and sat with one leg out of the van like he might leave now if only I did not need him to stay. He took my hat off my head and set it near my feet, neatly. He tucked the blanket around my shoulders with the care of a man who wants the nurse to like him. "You're thinking it's a van," he said, conversational. "You're thinking someone will see it if they come back here to smoke. They won't. They go to the front for the light." I pictured the front. The glow that makes moats look like magic, the pictures, smudged, scratched, of the girls with sandwiches on the windows of the old sub shop, the men who like to stand in pairs and blow big talk into the midnight to see it steam. I pictured them not walking down this alley because alleys are where the world turns quiet around its own bad news. "People come," I said, "because saying people might change what people do." "Not for this," he said, and the way this wrote his syllable made my stomach look for a stair to sit down on. "I have a trick I use when I am certain something cannot be done kindly and must be done well. I narrate like I am dead already and leaving a good story for the people who will want to think I was smart before I was unlucky. I tell a future jury the parts to look for. I remind the future me where I put the small heroics. It makes my hands steadier if my voice sounds like it belongs to someone else." I looked at the steel wall 1 inch from my eye and I said inside my head, "He isn't cruel. He is tidy, and tidy can be turned into a weapon." He leaned over me and I let my face do the polite flinch. He pressed tape across my mouth as tenderly as a man setting a bandage on a child's scraped knee. He pressed the corners with his thumbs in 2 firm little checks, and then spent a second longer on the left side than the right, like he had learned something about how to keep the breath quiet and wanted to do his best work at it. The card whispered like a mouse finding the seam of a pantry door. The left wrist wrap let go 3 hairs' width because metal edges and glue do not like each other as much as glue and skin pretend to. I kept my eyes closed. I opened my eyes again. Men like him like to watch you do that. It makes the moment feel cinematic. I let him have his theater. I kept the card moving under the coat like some dumb animal I kept in there to warm. We moved. He drove like horizontal prayer. He took the bumps slow and sighed when the van told him it appreciated his care. The rosary, 3 beads short, tapped. The blue carpet made a small sound under the blanket when the wheel cut into a turn. That boot-on-shag friction that puts basements into the back of your throat. I put my bound wrists against the corner of the van's floor seam and tested without letting the metal make the little squee noise that would tell the room there was another metal in here. I remembered the story all Delaware women know, even if they don't know they know it. Blue carpet. A van. The corridor that curves like a mouth into a dare. Women who had had to be identified through the retired names of their teeth. The story thrummed like a migraine you pretend you don't have because you can't reschedule the meeting. He stopped. He didn't cut the engine this time. He listened to something outside that only people who think roads keep promises can hear. He made the handbrake do its soft little applause. He slid the door 2 inches wider. Cold bit my lip through the tape. He reached for my ankles. He lifted them like a father lifts a child to move them to the couch without waking them, which is to say he lied to both of us. I kicked. Even a gentle kick, constrained inside a blanket, is a rehearsal for a better one. It startled him. Not a lot. Enough to make his calm cough. He waggled my leg once and let the weight tell him that I had a plan that hadn't made new bones yet. He set my foot down. He patted the blanket as if it were misbehaving and would understand his request. "Don't," he said. "You'll fall. You'll hit your head." Through tape, I said the thing men like him like to believe. "I'm good." He nodded, satisfied, like we'd agreed on a rate for services, and he slid a cuff, the soft kind. He is not cruel. He is a hobbyist. Around the nylon and back to the van's interior ring, as if the ring had always been for that. The card bit deeper. The adhesive tasted its own failure and became enthusiastic. One layer, another. The little sweet pop of being free walked across my skin like the first steps after numb feet come back to you and hate you for the cold. My left hand became useful. He brought his face closer to my cheek, checking tape, counting breath. I turned my head toward him the way women do in movies when they are about to say a line that will make a man realize he has loved them all along. He liked that picture. He leaned in a little bit, the way men lean in when they want to believe in beauty even when beauty isn't something that wants to be in the room. With my left hand, under my coat, I found the hazard light button again. Click, click, click. The alley began to blink red. He did not slap my hand. He did not stomp. He reached in through the narrow gap and turned the dial down on the heater, as if the sound and the blinking belonged to each other. He said, "Not helpful." And the words in his mouth made me want to laugh so hard I would break my ribs. But laughing is a thing you do when the house is burned down and everyone you love is already in the yard, counting. A security truck rolled slow at the end of the alley, the lights lazy and not searching yet, the driver's mouth probably full of the last good sip of lukewarm coffee. He would not have looked if the blink were not a rhythm humans recognize from inside their cuticle beds as a thing that wants attention now. He turned his head. The truck robin hopped closer, then closer, like a person who sees something odd and wants to make it into not odd before he has to explain it to somebody with a clipboard. My captor breathed out. I could feel it through the air like he had emptied a drawer that had been stuck for weeks. He lifted his hands, not up, not high, just off me, and arranged them in the air like a man arranging a balanced load on a dolly so that the box that wants to fall doesn't yet. He let the blinkers blink still. He could have turned them off. He didn't because he wanted the security guard to believe in coincidence and in men who help. He said, under his breath, and I felt it on my cheek, "Be good." He went to the front of the van so he could be seen as not lurking over the wrong section of the picture. He rolled down the driver's window and did the neighbor nod. He looked like a man telling a small weather lie about an engine. He gestured to the blank dark and then back at the dashboard as if to say damn thing with his eyebrows. He did it so well that I saw the guard begin to soften toward him. Men are good at wanting to be friends with other men who can make tools behave. The guard's truck idled at the mouth of the lane. He did not get out yet. Boredom makes bones slow. But he did click on his spotlight and rake it, lazy, across the back wall. It found the opening of the van like a cat finds the warmest square of the carpet. It found my face. It found the tape. I made myself look like anything except the thing I was. I opened my eyes like a girl posing for a picture in terrible lighting. I lifted the edge of the blanket with my left hand, the hand that had quietly declared independence, and I showed the guard a palm that might have been saying hello if he weren't a person who knew what help is spelled like in hands. He did not move at first. You will judge him for that. Don't. The world has taught men 1,000 wrong lessons about other people's business. He relearned them all in 1 second. He put his truck in park, he got out, he kept one hand on his radio, and he said not loud because loud makes wrong men make choices faster. You folks good? Sticky door, my captor said, with a friendly little long-suffering sigh that would have gotten him a free oil change if a good mechanic had been near enough to be charmed by it. Aha! the guard said, which is no in Delaware when a man has a little light on his truck and a jacket that says security and he's paid to be nosy even when nosy gets him yelled at. The guard stepped into the beam he'd made with his own light. He let his face be seen. He looked at me, not at the man. He got the tape and the blanket and the wrist in one picture, and he said, to his radio, easy, even, not the voice of a man who will ask the night to go wild, "Unit check my 30, need a second set." And then to me, in a careful voice that leaves room for people to come into their courage, "Ma'am, you want out of there?" Men who take things don't love when the grammar includes the person who is supposed to give. My captor set his jaw, not hard. He wore disappointment like a good sweater, broken in, still soft. He lifted both hands so the palms were clean and visible, and he said to the guard, in a voice I have heard fathers use in toy aisles when toddlers get ideas, "She slipped. I'm helping. It's cold." He made cold sound like a friend we'd both agreed was allowed to sit on the sofa when we were trying to watch the game. I nodded. I nodded because I was the one with a canvas I could ruin and make it art. I nodded like a woman who knows she owes gratitude and hasn't yet found the angle of her head. And while I nodded, I brought my left hand, the one the tape had given back to me, down through the blanket to the strap at my ankles and found the little plastic latch that men who love tidy like to believe makes their tidy both noble and reversible. It stuck, but it was a stick that had been frozen and thawed and mishandled and would eventually remember it was built for movement. I squeezed it with the same gentleness he had used on me and felt the nylon give up 2 clicks. Then one more. I don't remember deciding to scream. The noise came up my throat like the time I swallowed pool water at 9 and came up choking chlorine and pride. It wasn't a scream like in the movies. It was a big, ugly sound. It made the guard's face open with recognition, like a grocery store clerk remembering your brand of cereal. He took a step. My captor kept his hands up. He could have run. He didn't. He had spent so long being tidy, he didn't know what to do with mess and a witness. He looked at me with a look I have only ever seen on the faces of men who don't know how to cry, a tight little disappointment, not in me in the night for not collaborating properly. The guard said the holy words, "Ma'am, I'm going to ask you to step toward me." And I stood up with one ankle half-leashed and one hand free and tape still dressing my mouth like shame. And I did. I lunged. I nearly fell. I did not care. I hit the ground with my palms and loved the stinging in them because pain meant I wasn't a blanket. The guard put his arm out and made a fence with his body that had a hinge in it, and I slipped through. My captor said the last line men like him are allowed before the world decides grammar belongs to the rest of us. Now, let's not. And the patrol car from the other end of the plaza slid in on blue like a blessing that would not ask me if I deserved it. The deputy had the good sense to be unhandsome. Kind eyes, nothing in his face that made me feel like this was a moment that had been waiting to be photographed. He spoke to the guard first, a nod, a small paragraph of shared job language. Then to me. "You're all right," which wasn't an assessment. It was a promise to make his verbs into the world's nouns. He saw the tape, the cuff at my ankle, the blue scratch of the carpet's long-ago kiss across the blanket fibers. He kept his voice small. He kept his body big. He asked for my hands like a nurse and cut the tape with scissors. A middle school would have turned away as dull. He did it fast. He tried not to look. He looked anyway, because that is the job, too. They sat me on the bumper of the police car with its warm hood kissing my spine through the coat. Someone put my hat back on my head like I was their sister. The security guard stood with his planted feet saying, I stayed to whatever in the night wanted to argue. My captor let his hands be cuffed. He did not fight. He requested as if booking were a customer service, gentle with the wrist. And I thought of all the wrists he had not been gentle with, and I swallowed a mean laugh that might have returned to my throat as bile. The deputy asked me 3 questions. Hurt? I shook my head. Know him? I shook again. Name? I said it, and my name sounded so unfamiliar in that place that I almost cried because it belonged to me more than it ever had when I said it into my bathroom mirror to practice being confident. They took him away into the rest of the light. The guard stayed with me. He looked at the hazard lights blinking on the tire-rutted alley, and he said what men say when the simplest thing in the room is the thing that held the door open for the complicated truth. Good thinking. I wanted to ask him whether he would marry my hazard button and give it a good life full of children and long weekends at the shore. I wanted to laugh again. I did not. My mouth hurt in the corners where the adhesive had liked me more than I liked it. The deputy with the kind eyes said, "We're going to the station." And I said, "Okay," and looked back at the van once like it might decide to tell me something else before we left. It didn't. The rosary in the window swung a small approving arc like we had done something because a grandmother in the next county had been praying her old, patient little prayers for whatever worried her most in general. At the station, a woman with coffee breath and a sweater that said Dover in a font that didn't belong to Dover brought me a paper cup of water and said, "It's not much, but it's here." She cut the adhesive out of the hair that had decided to marry it. She said, "Sorry," each time the scissors had to choose between mercy and speed. I said, "It's okay, because mercy and speed are equally welcome after midnight if you've made too many decisions already." Detective Mahoney came in with a legal pad and a face that had had the night vacuumed off it and reattached by force of will. He did not sit right away. He stood to make the room his without taking anything from me. "You're safe," he said, and I said, "For now," because I was a person who had recently learned the difference between safe and not dead. He asked for the story like he was already holding it without making me lift its heavy parts. I told him where the van found me. I told him the first wrong turn. I told him the heater and the rosary and the milk crate and the blue carpet. I told him the tape. I told him the hazard light. I told him the voice he used, the gentleness he wore like a jacket. I told him, in a voice that insisted on being even because any other tone would blow the cups off the table. He wasn't cruel. He was careful. Mahoney wrote that word down like a mathematician notes a constant in a problem and knows it will appear again. He asked me if he used a name. He didn't, I said, and hated the part of me that wanted to assign one to him so my brain could put him in the file where names live. He asked about my wrists, my ankles, my mouth. I told him which side of the tape he favored, and he nodded. Not because I was right, but because the telling was right. They photographed my wrists. The camera made that small shutter snick that sounds too cheerful for what it is. The evidence tech apologized when the flash popped near my eye. I said, "It's okay, because apologizing makes rooms less dangerous even when nothing changes in them." Mahoney said, "You did good." And I told him to say well if he meant the grammar and good if he meant the person. And he laughed once, tired, glad for the part of me that had not been politely quiet to make another man's night tidy. He left the room. He came back with a list of questions that had dates and times pinned to them like moths in a glass case. "We have him on a stop last week," he said. "We have a patrol plate take from 3 days ago at the mall. We have a note about a van and a woman behind the payday place 3 months back that went nowhere because Knights eat their own paperwork." He paused and waited for me to decide whether that sentence made me angry. It did. He let that be. "Do you want a shower?" the coffee breath woman asked me later. "We have a place that's not awful." I did. The water was the temperature of compromise, but it was still water. And it ran, and I thought about the van's carpet and the way the blue of it had been almost pretty in the dome light, like a childhood memory of a rec room before anyone had the idea to stop believing in safety. By morning, the station was full of other people's mornings. A man came in yelling about a neighbor's fence. A woman came in with a box of donuts in a flavor that smelled like maple but looked like cardboard. Mahoney went out. Mahoney came back. He had a coolness about him that made me think he liked chess and hated charades. He sat again in the not-awful room and said without ceremony, "We're going to ask you to look at some photographs." And then, "We found things in the van." And then gently, "I don't need to tell you what." I nodded. I did not need him to tell me if the tape was there. I had eaten it. I did not need him to tell me if there was a kit that people put names on so they don't have to say the sentence. He brings things, so he does not have to decide anew what kind of man he will be tonight. He did say there were fibers. He said there were places in the fabric that have learned to carry history. He said the quiet kind of good again when I mentioned the blue carpet and the way it feathery frayed at the heel. The news called before I slept. Not because I'm special, because the world likes to take comfort in making a shape out of danger with words, and the shape they chose had to include me if it was going to fit the county this time. Mahoney put his hand over the receiver and said to me, "You don't owe anyone anything." And I said, "Except the women who don't get to tell it." And he looked at the ceiling and said something quiet that made him blush like he'd said a word he wouldn't say in front of his mother. I went home after they let me sign papers that prove you are alive enough to sign things. The apartment smelled like the onion we had meant to sauté last week and never did. My roommate's ashtray had a smear of lipstick on the wrong end of the butt because she likes to pretend she doesn't smoke and can't do it elegantly. I shut the door. I locked it twice. I sat down on the floor and practiced breathing without anyone telling me to, and when I could stand, I put a roll of duct tape into the trash, then took it back out of the trash, then put it in the closet, because there is a part of me that insists we will still have to hold the world together when men like him stop stepping out of vans into it. They called to ask me to come identify. They called to ask me to come listen. They called to tell me he might be what the state had once feared it had and hoped it did not, a man who did not mind if a map remembered him. I sat in the long bench outside courtroom 4B and tried to make my face ready for remembering under fluorescent that makes everyone look honest and tired and somehow made of paste. When they put him in front of us in that suit that makes all men look like they will sell you a used refrigerator, his hands were free. He kept them neat. He nodded when someone told him, "This is the form of the day." He looked like a man who would apologize if he scuffed your shoe in a supermarket aisle by accident and mean it. He looked over our heads once at some wet spot on the acoustical ceiling tile and smiled like he had found religion there. He did not look at me properly, but when his eyes crossed my face, they did not change. He had expected me to live. It was part of his grammar. When it was time to speak, he did. He did not say sorry. He did not say no. He did not say not guilty, like men say it when they think it will save them. He said something that sounded like a man reading a list he had written in the night when the room was quiet and the heater made small clicks. He said the law wanted something. He said he would give it to them. He said done like he was proud of the past tense. When I went home that night, the hazard light on my old Civic blinked for a minute after I turned the engine off. A weird little delay that meant I might have a fuse going. I did not fix it. I let it blink. I sat in the car and watched it. It looked like a heart refusing to learn the schedule of its own beat. I let it tell me the story of a red square of light that would not stop asking a night to look at it. And I thought, small, stupid miracles. I will donate my whole terrified life to your church. People will ask me forever whether he smiled while he did it. They will ask me to catalog his hands, to weigh whether the tape said mercy or method, to tell them if the carpet was a particular brand their basement has so they can rip it out like hygiene is theology, and if they are clean enough, bad things get bored and go away. They will ask me whether it's true that the rosary lost beads in that window because some woman before me loved it so hard she made a wish with plastic. They will ask me whether I'll ever take a ride again. They will ask me if I hate men. The answer changes depending on the hour you ask it, and whether I've eaten, and whether the news is playing something the news should not be allowed to play before the sun has considered its choices. Here is what stays. The night is not a person. It does not make promises to you. Men do. Watch which ones collect tidy like a religion. Watch which ones love lists. Watch which ones tell you you are good the way a boss tells an employee that will be all. Watch which ones set the blanket down like a present and call the quiet a kindness. Then notice how the quiet is only kind to them. The court made a shape out of him. The state put that shape somewhere, right? I do not have to share a grocery store with. The papers wrote and rewrote the old story. The corridor, the van, the women who couldn't outwait their luck. The guard got a commendation, probably. He didn't tell me. He didn't have to. I bought him a coffee once, months later, and he said, I just drove where the light told me. I said, me too, and we both thought that was a nice thing to say, even if it wasn't true. I kept the bus card, a piece of plastic with a corner like a tooth, a dumb little square that never learned my name but recognized the shape of not this and made it into maybe something else. If I touch it too long, my hands smell like cheap lamination for an hour, and the hour is usually enough to make the room feel like it has windows, even when it doesn't. Sometimes, at a particularly busy intersection, the world will cough a blue van out of its lungs and set it next to me at a light. I play a game I do not recommend. I count the rosaries. I count the missing beads. I count the men who put their hands on the wheel like music teachers. I do not count the ones like him. There are not many like him. There are too many like him. I moved, not far, just enough to make the road between where it happened and where I sleep break into pieces smaller than a paragraph. I learned the names of the second shifters at the diner where the lights mark the counter like a runway. They call me kid, even though I am not one. They pour coffee like a sermon. They know my walk at 2 a.m. when I need a place to sit where the world makes sense in systems. Order pad, short order plate. I let the hiss of the grill be the sound a van makes when it becomes a memory. It helps. There was a day they asked me to stand and read the thing the state wanted in a voice they thought would mean something. I wore a sweater that made my collarbones look like punctuation. I said the line about the harm and the loss, like I was reminding the court that nouns still existed. He looked at the ceiling again. He smiled like stained glass. When they asked him if he had anything else to say, he did that strange dance some men do, where they pretend to be the narrator and not the subject. He never used I. It made the judge tilt his head like he was trying to hear a radio station on the edge of another country. I thought about asking where he put her. One of them. We all thought about asking. The state asked by asking, and he answered by putting his hands just so, like he was laying brick, and saying things about justice that would, to an untrained ear, sound like he had written them for a pamphlet about making communities better. He did not tell. Men like him like to keep the map of something inside for one last secret. The secret is their body's last private room. On the day they told me the last step they planned to take with him, I ate toast and eggs and sunshine. I had mine in the kitchen, standing, because standing felt like a celebration of furniture. I didn't go where they went to do it. I wrote names on a piece of paper instead. Not his, not even mine. The names of women and places and streets and the guard and the deputy and the detective and the milk crate and the hazard light. I made a little church out of paper and cheap ink. I lit no candles. I put the list in the drawer where I keep the duct tape still, because tapes are for holding and for letting go. If you ask me for a lesson, I will refuse you. Those come on mugs and stick in your throat like chalk. If you ask me for the detail that matters, I will offer you several, and see which one makes you feel like your own house is possible. The way cold can be a friend because it helps your breath tell you you are here. The way blanket fuzz remembers what touched it. The way male attention arranged to be kind can become, at a certain temperature, an apology for the worst thing. The way small red lights made for car breakdowns and tickets can be flares in a quiet that would prefer it if you went along with it. Sometimes, when men ask me to speak on a panel because the world wants me to repair the world for it, I say no. The way my mouth said help in the alley, an animal sound that ends up a word by accident. Sometimes I say yes, and I say something like this. Tidy is not the opposite of cruel. It's the manner in which some cruelties prefer to arrive. I do not make myself a saint because I lived. That is too heavy. I make myself a person. I eat fries at the fair. I forget to buy paper towels. I mend the sleeve of a sweater while watching a show that would embarrass me if I had better taste. I walk through the big box store's parking lot with the cart rattling behind me and choose the aisle where men are always putting tape in carts like their homes require binding and not building. I reach for the thing I need, and I let my hand hover, and then, most days, I choose rope for laundry instead and try to tell myself I have learned a different lesson. On bad days, I put the tape in slowly, and on good days, I put it back. I will not tell you he didn't hurt me. He did. He will be alive for me in the way pain is alive until something else loves you better than pain does and tells it to go to sleep. But when I close my eyes and watch the van open again and feel the air reach for my face like a woman's hand, the part that wakes me up is not the tape. It is the sound a little red light makes against a wall when it insists on existing. It is the click. It is the way the guard's throat cleared when he saw a picture he had not wanted to tell his wife about that night and decided to involve himself in it anyway. Sometimes the road by the canal is empty enough that when I take it, I want to stop and let the night know it is forgiven. I don't. Forgiveness is not a thing you do for animals or for asphalt. You do it for bodies with names. There are names in my drawer I cannot forgive, or I will throw away the last thread I have to pull them back through the stupid dark into rooms where people say Ellis, DeMauro, Finner, Gordon, Meyer like prayers you can touch. Some of those names I knew how to say before the night made them vowels in my mouth. Some I learned after. All of them make the hazard lights in my chest blink, sometimes without asking my permission. And look, I am still here to be annoyed at the blinking. I am still here to be grateful it works. If you are a person who drives at 3 a.m. and sees a van in the wrong place, and a red blink in the wrong night, and a girl who looks like she might be trying not to ruin somebody's evening by asking to be rescued, will you do me a favor? Be impolite. Pull over. Put your nose into someone else's. Let your coffee go cold. Make your radio say to the ceiling what you saw, and do not apologize for having seen it. Be the kind of man women can make a body memory out of that makes their breath slow down when they think of it later. I am not brave. I am a person who was scoring her life with little acts of obedience until one of them became a way to make a man who loved tidy count wrong. That is the entire magic. If you can make someone who keeps lists count wrong, you have taught the night a trick it will not unlearn. So if you see me at the bus stop and it is late and my phone is dead and the wind has set hands into my pockets like it is owed money, and a van pulls up and a man says miss and his voice is warm like glove compartments, ask me for my number, not for romance, for honesty. Call it for me. Make the phone light up. There is a light inside every bad story. This is the light in mine. How am I doing now? Well, I kept the bus card, learned to love hazard lights, and I always pick the impolite helper. Killer reveal. Stephen Brian Pennell, a.k.a. the Route 40 Killer, a.k.a. the Corridor Killer. Stephen Brian Pennell, 1957 to 1992, is Delaware's only known modern serial killer, operating along U.S. Route 40 near Bear, New Castle in 1987 to 1988. He abducted women into a blue Ford van, a key detail that helped investigators form a task force and send undercover officers to the corridor. Fiber from a blue carpet in a suspect van and later DNA helped link the crimes. In 1989, a jury convicted him of 2 murders, Shirley Ellis and Catherine DeMauro, and deadlocked on a third, Michelle Gordon. The state later indicted him for Gordon and for Kathleen Meyer. Pennell subsequently pled no contest to those charges and sought the death penalty, making unusual biblical arguments in court. He was executed by lethal injection on March 14, 1992, Delaware's first execution since 1946.